Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Soak, which comes slightly late today. I do apologise, the M50 traffic and all that. But we look forward to our match against England, all the other Six Nations action, and of course look back over the Pro 14 and our victory in the wind and the rain against the Cheetahs. So let's start with that one first. Pretty good victory in the wet in the RDS last Saturday.
Yeah, I was impressed with them. In absolute awful conditions, really bad. They had to clear both stands. The conditions were so hazardous. Both stands at the end, and we were all wedged into two stands. But I was so glad I moved up the back of the stands because the weather was. You could see the people at the front of the stands cowering and putting on their ponchos. So I wouldn't fancy being a South African chap on the field after coming from 30-degree heat in Bloemfontein. I know Pienaar is probably used to it, but maybe a lot of the rest of them weren't so used to it.
Imagine that.
You know, I think they put up a pretty good show, and they really weren't disheartened by going whatever it was, 36 points behind. They came back and put on a few, which is good to see from them. You know, in the adversity, getting pumped by a team and having the wherewithal to come back.
It's a pity. Well, not a pity. It's a pity from their point of view. They didn't play
like that at the beginning.
Well, even they played that front row from the very start, and it took them 50 minutes of the match to realise that they actually had
the right front row.
Well, even but a dominant. You know, like every time it was going to be probably a penalty against if they'd used it, and in those kind of conditions. Just keep playing the ball down in the corners.
Yeah, so sometimes Leinster have fallen off it a bit when the changes come in, or after the changes come in. But you have to say Leinster played the conditions very well. We saw the week before, we saw England against Scotland. Two supposedly better teams playing supposedly higher standard of rugby. Well, it is a higher standard of rugby. Failed to manage conditions as well as Leinster did. And indeed, towards the end, as Cheetahs did. I think a huge amount of credit for that has to go to Kieran Frawley. I thought he had an excellent game.
Yep, absolutely.
I thought his range of passing and the passes he selected were absolutely top notch. You know, he managed the conditions really well.
He did,
and that's what you have to do.
Even from the get go, within I don't know how many minutes, like 3 minutes, he put in a beautiful kick, a diagonal kick into the far corner, and you know, just kind of just as you said, he was just showing a great range of passing, but also like it was just his intent. Yeah. He wanted to go out there and boss it, and I suppose from his point of view, he's thinking, okay, there's a couple of lads ahead of me that are on the Irish, on the national team, but it's his opportunity now to kind of say, well, I'm third choice behind, you know, Sexton and Byrne.
Yeah,
can I change that?
It gives him a chance to put his hand up, and which in fairness to him he took. I thought he was very good. I wasn't, unlike John, I wasn't brave enough to brave the conditions.
I live a lot closer, Dave.
I had a mother-in-law's 70th birthday to go to. I do have a legitimate excuse, but I will be honest here. I will be honest here. That even if I didn't have that, there's no fucking way I would have gone to that match in those conditions. Not a chance. And I'm in the dry part of the ground. Yeah, but I'm not stupid.
That was the option I took. I looked out the window. No.
I was looking across at your
absolutely literally.
Where you normally stand, about half the terrace was empty.
Yeah, I know that.
They were all stepped back.
You can see people do actually have legs in there. You can see.
About half the terrace was full, but it was the back half.
Yeah, I know. The weather was just atrocious. It really was.
I mean, it must have been
fair play to anyone who got the win. But again,
you have to take your hat off to the 8,000
who turned up.
You know, and especially at this time of the year where, you know, Six Nations tickets aren't cheap. There's people probably going over to the match in Twickenham at the weekend.
Lucky
but
bastard.
People did kind of come out when there's a great festival of rugby on at this time of year with the Six Nations, and also obviously the matches coming up in the Aviva with Leinster, with the Munster game and the Saracens game. You know, people could quite easily pick and choose, and we did. But 8,000 people didn't.
Yes, that's true. And it was a large crowd at the weekend. So fair play.
Indeed.
So I was just going to say that I thought that the fellas that came back from the Ireland camp played particularly well. Like they kind of readjusted back in, like under the Schmidt regime. You know, when he was coach of Leinster, I remember he was very reluctant to welcome back fellas from the.
Stick him on the bench at best.
Like he was, well, you haven't started. If you haven't trained on Monday with us, he ain't gonna pick up the.
Yeah.
Put on the boots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, if they weren't, I get the impression that those guys were probably training all week, that they were released after the weekend rather than released on the
think
Friday
so, yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're only going to get the bench. But you know, like you say, fair play to them. They like everybody really dug in. Like they seem to have a thing going now that they've got an incredible record this season, and they don't want to be on the team that relinquishes that record. So you know, they weren't going to do it this week. We actually have a game next week in the Ganol.
In the Ganol.
Yeah.
In the Nall.
It's a while since that name's been used and bandied around in this company.
And that's not the Nall in North County Dublin.
No, it's not the Nall. The Nall.
It's the Nall in Neath. So I'm sure we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's I was extremely impressed with the game, and I hope we can perform as well when we go over to their back garden.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the other games kind of went according to plan, except Ospreys getting their second win of the season.
It was
against Ulster, which I thought was quite an unusual result. I mean, and it's obviously coming into the week that we ended up having to play them over there.
Yeah, they got a bit of a fillip from that, and they got Mike Ruddock in. There's whispers about various other head coaches.
Di Young?
I don't know. It'll be Di Young now, but there was whispers of Toby Booth coming over there.
Heard that. Yeah.
To take over, which would be interesting. Another forwards coach. Mike Ruddock obviously has them playing with a bit of pride, though. You know, it seems they can do that to Ulster. Ulster are no slouches, even without their few internationals. They're a decent side.
But they would have had a few of the fellas that had
yeah, they couple of the returnees.
A few returnees and a few lads that might have felt a bit irked from not getting selected. McCluskey been one. I'm sure was Jordy Murphy playing?
He came on. They had Ospreys started off very, very well, and got up a decent lead. I think they were 14 points ahead at one stage.
That's right, yeah.
Then Ulster clawed it back,
but they couldn't take it home,
and then conceded a stupid penalty once they had done so. And Ospreys buried the penalty, and that was kind of all she wrote for scoring. It was poor enough from Ulster, but you know, Ospreys don't give a shit if Ulster are poor or good. Ospreys beat them. Ospreys did what they had to do.
Yeah, but
and getting some kind of momentum with a new coach in there, and it kind of justifies what he's been saying to the players. If you do this, and this, and then they do this, and this, and they get the win, and that's you take that on to the next day. I would have preferred they hadn't done it the week before playing us.
Yeah.
As long as they don't do it the week of playing us.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Ulster are kicking themselves knowing that the Cheetahs were coming to Dublin, which, okay, I know the weather kind of, but if they had been all things been equal, generally clubs that come to Dublin don't come away with any points.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Ulster were thinking, if we can get over there, we can extend our lead into second place. But now, like, it's, you know what I mean, it's a nil-sum game, really.
It's Pienaar's homecoming game next weekend.
See, he kind of stirred the pot a little bit. He gave an interview and said he hasn't really settled in the 3 years that he's been left and misses it. And
this is his church.
I think the talk that they want to return there when he
that's
finishes
always
up.
been his plan.
Yeah.
It's always been his plan.
He hasn't sold his house or anything.
His missus didn't settle in France at all.
No.
And his sister died.
He might well go into coaching with Ulster. You never know what might happen there. Who knows? Still playing anyway. I mean, the guy must be knocking on for 75 now.
Yeah, 78 or 89, I think.
He's up there. So you can't see him playing another season after this one, can you?
No, it depends if the money's there.
Depends on how he feels. You know, I mean, some guys can go
he looks
on a
fit.
bit. He looks in good nick. Like,
he looks after himself too.
Depends. A lot of guys
Both on
who
and
get
off
to
the field.
a lot of guys who get to a certain age. It's not the match. It's how they feel on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You know, and as you get older, it's the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday get harder. But if he's still doing that, if he's still okay at that stage of the week, then he'll probably go on for another year. It depends on himself.
But you hear a lot of the ex-player or the former players have been interviewed, and they're kind of going, well, I just couldn't. I just had enough. Like Tommy Bowe, I've heard him been interviewed, and he was saying, no, I've just hit the right time. I wanted to walk away. I think Trimble said more or less the same.
Still walk.
Well, he could still walk, yeah.
It is. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, the players have to do what they feel is best for themselves, but it depends on how they feel themselves. He could go on another year. He could decide to stop.
Yeah.
You never know.
And so just another couple of the results. Munster, obviously, they hammered the Kings. We put 60 odd points on them.
Because Freeze,
Mr. Hodnett had a cracking game
Yeah.
for his debut.
Very good.
very good player.
He looked like a young Sean O'Brien.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of
He reminds me more of a
good
young
use.
Anthony Foley, actually. He has that kind of. I mean,
Nous.
he has that nous. Yeah, you can see him. He's a thinking man's rugby player. But he's a bit more. In fairness, he's a bit more of an athlete than Anthony Foley was. But he has that same kind of rugby brain. It'll be interesting to see if they can bring it through.
Well, it
If
also means
if he learns the Afrikaans, you know.
it also means that actually a Munster mate of mine sent me a thing saying, I know the Kings aren't up to much, but you know we put a good few tries in them, and it's always nice to win a local derby. Man with a sense of humour, but it might make some of our back rowers, less likely to leave. The fact that he has been uncovered as a live option with Jack O'Donoghue playing well,
I'll
and
have to find somewhere for them.
so on and so forth.
When's Jared Butler leaving?
Is he leaving? I think he's got another year or
I
two
know, it's joke.
in his contract. But that would be a more likely destination for our back row, given that
Yeah.
Hodnett, etc. are. I mean, we've
In
already
situ.
got so many back rows up in Ulster. There's a,
Speaking of Connacht, they also had a very good win
Yeah,
against,
great win against
Cardiff,
Cardiff,
your
yeah.
old team, John.
I haven't played for them since the 50s, though. You know?
I don't think anyone associated with Cardiff was particularly pleased with themselves about how that game went. They were dreadful.
I don't think so.
Mulvihill was quite scathing. The players themselves were quite scathing in their own performances. Certainly, the media in Wales have been less than pleased. Cardiff are doing that flattering to deceive thing again, and now they're in full deception mode. You know, at the start of every season, Cardiff always start well, and people think there might be something in it.
So Wales Grand Slam?
So definitely Wales Grand Slam. Well, Wales can't do a Grand
No,
Slam.
of course not. No.
Can't even get a triple crown, lads.
No.
But Cardiff have kind of the wheels have fallen off the Cardiff wagon again this year, so it's going to be interesting to see, because I think that Mr. Mulvihill might have used up a lot of credit that he had in the bank. I think that's all gone, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Be interesting.
And Welsh rugby can be a bit of a bear pit when it comes to coaching appointments, as we saw recently.
Well, maybe you're saying that Di Young is being at a loose end.
Well, he is a Cardiff man.
He's a Cardiff man. He brought them through a lot of their good times
Yeah.
in the late noughties. So
Yeah.
you never know. He might end up back there for the good of his health, or not.
You never know. So now turn our attention to the Six Nations. So we take on England and Twickenham on Sunday. Interested in reading, since '82, I went to that match when I was in school. Remember Ginger McLaughlin's famous
Solo try. Famous solo try. Yeah.
Solo try, yeah. We were taken to that match. It's under 13s in school, and since then we've played 19 times in Twickenham in Six Nations games, and we've won 6, which is quite a pretty good record, I would say, considering how crap we were for
a long portion of that.
chunk of
Yeah.
and even say in the
4 of
last,
them in the actual Six Nations.
yeah,
Since 2000.
exactly, and it's not a bad record. It's about 1 in 3 visits we win over there, which considering that rugby is how important home advantage is,
Yeah.
it's actually a pretty good return.
And if you think about it, that in the last 20 years, England have won the World Cup, been to another final, another two and then final last year. So, I mean, England have been the dominant force in the Northern Hemisphere over the last 20 years.
Well, we had 2 of those wins while they were world champions.
Yes, I know. So we've had...
They're in another World Cup
Twickenham.
final in '91 as well.
They were, yes, that's
Yeah.
what I was talking about. Yeah,
Okay,
that's right,
that's
yeah.
right.
But, I mean... It does show that despite the home and away thing, I mean, international rugby at this level, because Ireland have been good over since 2000, have been certainly much better than they were in the 20 years previously. 20 years either side of the millennium are very different kind of views. Obviously, professionalism came in, but Ireland would go to Ireland and Twickenham either win or get an absolute spanking. There doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground. Actually, when Joe Schmidt was in charge, when Joe Schmidt was in charge and Stuart Lancaster was in charge of England, England beat us, but it wasn't a spanking. But generally, it is a spanking if they win.
There's been quite a few spankings over there.
If they win, it's a spanking. If we win, it's...
The Tom Cork debacle in 2012.
Yeah.
That stands out.
But that can never happen again thanks to Sevens rugby.
It's never happened again thanks to 23-man squads. Dave.
No, Sevens rugby. That's what's saved.
Anyway, your hobby horse again.
Which is an opportunity to dig a knife in.
I know.
They will grab it.
Oh, no, I've got more knowledge coming up later. Don't worry.
Well, Twickenham, like compared to the Welsh and the Scottish, especially the Scottish, I mean, they never win. Literally never win in Twickenham. We've done pretty well. We've done, we've nothing to fear going there. I mean, I can remember going there when we got smashed in, I think it was 0-2, and we were winning 3-0. And Jordan Murphy got stretchered off and we got battered.
That's the game that
48-6 or something, I can't remember.
Ultimately did for Gatland, is it?
Wasn't that after No, I can't remember.
Because he was a head coach.
That was 0-0.
Oh, that was 0-0. Sorry,
yeah.
But we got a deal in that day as well.
Yeah. Well,
and that was ultimately, I think, his.
Yeah, it was because Eddie O'Sullivan was brought in behind him.
But the two after that, Eddie O'Sullivan has the most wins. He
Yeah.
got 2. He got 04 and 06. Joe Schmidt got 1. Declan Kidney got 1. And Farrell, we have yet to see.
Yet to see.
We've
Very
yet to see him get his
interesting.
first one.
Very interesting
his son.
dynamic, isn't it? Like, I mean, obviously he's coached Ireland against England as an assistant coach, but this time he's actually the head coach. And
He's also coached England against Ireland several times as an
fair
assistant coach. And obviously his son is
Very
high up in the leadership group.
Well.
Yeah. Another
it's
England
amazing how many of
player
that
from South
15
Africa.
Rugby World Cup, England Rugby World Cup, like there's obviously Cat, Farrell, Lancaster, and your man down in Munster, Roundtree.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's amazing.
We're
that's-
hoovering them up.
Really, you know what I mean? Like, but like you're kind of, they have so many coaches in England that are just discarded.
Yeah.
Like, they're still good coaches. They just, that campaign went poorly for them.
There's a soccerification of the England coaching job in rugby, where unless you win the World Cup, you're an absolute failure, an abject failure. No, Lancaster and Farrell made a mistake. The mistake I think they made was substituting Burgess against Wales.
Yeah, funny, irony of all ironies.
Yeah, that was the mistake they made.
Yeah.
And it was one mistake in a campaign. One mistake over a period of years in which
they couldn't do anything about the captain's decision to take a line out
Yeah,
and not
yeah,
take
yeah.
points to go.
But what I'm talking about is just in terms of
I
the
agree with
coaching
you.
staff.
I do agree with you on that.
They made one mistake over. I mean, they took a fairly dishevelled, shambolic England setup after the previous World Cup, with all the stuff about jumping into harbours and dwarf.
All the good crack things.
Yeah. But it had the England rugby team was at a low ebb in terms of what the public thought about it, what the rugby public thought about it, and they turned that around completely. They made that one mistake in that one match, and they basically ended up getting fired, or not having their contracts renewed or extended or whatever.
They had a great record up until that.
They had a very good record up until that. Now other teams are reaping the benefit of them.
We really are.
And England, for all, as you said, they have a lot of coaches, but they discard them all so quickly that they've had to go overseas for a coach.
Eddie Jones, anyone?
Yeah. No, that's what I'm
He's
saying.
still there.
Yeah, they had to go overseas for a coach.
No, I know.
What did O'Driscoll say? He called him out on something, didn't he? Was he basically? I think he was baiting him and kind of said, "Do you remember what you said about?"
What he said about Johnny
a
Sexton
couple of years ago,
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
if I was his parents, I'd be concerned.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing about one of the Scottish lads. It was a Welsh guy, wasn't it, last season?
Oh,
was it
who was that?
The out half?
Bigger.
Bigger. He
Yeah.
said the same thing again. Like, and it's.
Yeah, he can tip. He's a funny guy, but he can tip over into the classless at times.
Shitty little island.
That was to an audience of everything's on video nowadays, but it's very hard to. Very easy to take these things out of context when you see them on Twitter.
Well, that's true. But if you take them in the context of stuff being said by Eddie Jones, then that does kind of make a difference. I mean, but that's Eddie Jones.
Not necessarily defending the guy.
If you hire Eddie Jones, you know you're going to get that because that's the Eddie Jones. I'm not going to say it's the brand because it's not a brand. It's how he is. I mean, he is quite a confrontational.
I wonder what the.
There's the element of bogging about him, as they say in Australia. Bogging about him, there's that kind of thing, you know.
I wonder what the 57 old fart says.
Brian Moore called him famously.
Yeah.
Will Carling.
Sorry.
I wonder what they think of him and be in his. You know what I mean? They, I'm sure, will be very stiff upper lip and.
Well, they're too busy trying to get the tombolas out to try and save their clubs now that the RFU has cut all their funding.
Harsh.
Well, it's actually
But
true
fair.
at this stage. He's not. I mean, he wouldn't be in the traditional mould of an England rugby coach, who were either kind of guys like Stuart Lancaster in that kind of
Old headmaster kind of
yeah,
old
sports
game
master
yeah.
kind of thing, or upper crust gentleman types. We'd say like
Dick Best
or Jack Rowell.
Mm.
He's not in that mould at all. He doesn't. He breaks that mould completely. So
Well, he's a brash Aussie.
well, he is. But I'd say he's been less than enthused with all the talk of Razzie Erasmus. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Because because Ireland are going for Grand Slam on Saturday, Sunday. I mean, that's
Triple Crown anyway.
Triple Crown. Sorry, Triple Crown. I mean the triple, which is something like when
Well, we used to deride it not so long ago, didn't we?
when we were kids, winning a Triple Crown was enough to get you off homework and maybe a half day.
I remember they built the East Stand in the early 80s and they were almost going to call it the Triple Crown Stand.
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge thing. It was a huge thing, and it has become. And in the
Well, it never had a trophy until 04 or something.
in the kind of the postmodern knowingness of the game, we don't bother with that anymore because it's an old thing. But I actually think beating the three teams that are your closest rivals, your oldest rivals, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, well, I'll take it on Saturday or Sunday, should I say?
I think it's something to be valued. I know I'm almost alone entirely in that,
Yeah,
but I still think
it's
it's something to
good.
be
I
valued.
like a good Triple
There's a
Crown
place for
if they're
tradition,
available.
you know?
Yeah.
There's a place for tradition. Turning our attention, I suppose, to the pitch. So, looking at the team, he selected pretty much, the same starting 15 as against Wales, just with the one exception, Darius coming in place of Deegan.
On the bench.
On
He
the bench.
seems to have this new
Stephen Harris
word.
says it was Patchell that he was talking about.
You're right.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
He seems to have this Warren Gatland thing where he names his team very early. Joe Schmidt was the opposite. He would, you know.
I think he's trying
is
to...
it 5-2 yet? No, I'm not naming it yet. No, Farrell is just getting it. This is what I'm doing.
There's a part of that is a commercial decision that they didn't want all the teams being dumped out 24 hours before the thing. So no sponsor got a chance for clean air. So now they each have a day.
Right, okay.
And so the sponsor gets.
I did not know that,
Yeah.
Dave.
So there is a commercial element.
But I think there's also new room, sweeps fresh, and
Routines
like
are
they're
changing.
trying. Everything's changing. You know that the players are saying that they're not spending as much time getting lectured to, or endless hours on a laptop. They're actually doing stuff on the pitch, and
That's probably no harm, you know. It's the change is good, you know. The change will produce something. You know, I'm not saying, like, far be it for me to shit on Joe Schmidt to any degree, but just any coach who's been there, brilliant and all as he was, for that long, stuff needs to change to renovate,
you have to.
renew
I
the
mean,
team. Somebody needs to put his stamp on the thing, so, there needs to be
Czech said about 5 years is the.
yeah.
And if you
We
think
always
about
go
it,
back to that.
Joe was there for 6.
Joe was there for six, and then in Leinster beforehand.
Yeah,
As I
another
said,
four.
we had the same thing with Declan Kidney before that. He was Ireland coach for 5 or 6 years, but he'd been
Munster
Munster coach for
before that.
a decade before that. So it can be thing. And then there's the other thing as well. Players always love the coach that picks them.
Of course.
Yesterday's coach is dead man walking.
Yeah, even sometimes today's coach that's going to be yesterday's coach.
Yeah,
in
if they
6
know
months
he's gone. Yeah,
is not really that interesting
Yeah.
to them,
I suppose.
I've heard the same players say brilliant things. I mean, literally the same players say brilliant things about Gary Ella, Declan Kidney, Michael Cheika, Joe Schmidt, Matt O'Connor. Declan Kidney is Irish coach. Joe Schmidt is Irish coach. And then they're in the paper saying, he was rubbish. So I really.
Yeah, well, you're right. You can't bite the hand that feeds you, Dave.
No.
But on the team itself, I suppose he's rewarding performance against Wales. Everybody was writing off Peter O'Mahony in the early days, and in fact he was on the bench for the first match. Only Mr. Doris got injured, he wouldn't have been playing 75 minutes as he did.
But Darius hasn't played any rugby in
he hasn't
a month,
played.
so
He's played 4 minutes in however long it is.
I think it's only a month. Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely, you can't start him. But
it's certainly not Twickenham. That would be like the succession of back row players we destroyed by giving first caps to in Parc des Princes. You wouldn't do it. I mean, he's got the selection right for this team, for this game. He's made the changes on the bench, but I mean, it's going to be a tough game. But the problem is England don't know. I don't think this England team knows who or what it is. because with the removal of the Vunipolas,
Well, that's a big
That's a
fill-up
big
for us.
removal.
yeah, with the removal of the Vunipolas,
Who starts Ganger Marler?
yes, the restriction of look, don't worry, there won't be a brain cell between either of them anyway.
Exactly.
So,
But like that Genge fella is just a model for being able to wind him up.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
he could get a great few penalties out of him if you.
Oh, Tyke Furlong
plays
will be
your
at him, I
cards.
guarantee you. But
Tyke Furlong will be cheating against him, will he?
absolutely, I certainly hope so. If I ever saw a prop on the pitch not cheating, I'd be very disappointed.
You better cheat better
But,
than everyone
sorry,
else.
without the Vunipolas and with Tuolangi limited,
Well, he can't be that match fight either.
that's what I mean.
What was his injury? Was it in lower leg or something?
I don't know.
I can't
England,
remember.
who I think want to be a hard carrying team, a power team, are still playing that way, but without any power guys.
Mhm.
And they've got Curry at 8, which
Yeah, and I
But
mean,
they-
strange
is a
decision.
waste
But,
of-
but sorry,
it's a waste of a Curry
the
game.
personnel they have is a team that can play quick, clever, fast, moving rugby, but they don't want to play that way. So they have the personnel to play one way, and a game plan for different personnel.
But if you have Billy Vunipola in your team,
Yeah,
you have possibly the best player in the world
yeah.
because he can change how a game is,
Yeah.
how the result ends up.
He can play either way. He's that good.
But he generally plays a power game.
Yeah.
Like we saw what he did to Leinster in the
Mhm.
what he did to New Zealand, and it was only really when they got in, when the injuries were enforced in the scrum in the final against South Africa, and they tried to play a similar game against a very powerful side that they might have been able to match them. But generally speaking, when they play teams in the Northern Hemisphere, if they play and they have the personnel to do it, then they're pretty much unplayable. But take him out of the team, it's hard to change a whole team's
Yeah.
philosophy
But the problem.
with just one player.
I know, but it's not just one guy. I mean, they've lost a lot of the power guys. They've lost all their power guys now, but they haven't changed their game plan to
But
account. for it.
Mako doesn't carry as much as Billy. Like Billy is a wrecking
No,
ball.
but he is. But Mako's a huge tight carrier as well. He carries massively in the tight. They've lost.
Both got great hands, though.
They've lost all their power carriers, but they don't appear to. Now they might have a new game plan for Sunday. I don't know. It is Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is Sunday,
They might have a new game plan for Sunday. I don't know. But certainly in the games they've played thus far, they've tried to play game A with personnel B, when they should really be playing game B with personnel B.
Well, all I can say is
I mean, the selection of Curry. Curry went to that World Cup virtually unknown, apart from people who would watch it regularly, but certainly to the larger public, and came back a superstar. But he's been played in a completely different position now, a position he's not really suited to. In a game,
he's a
not
7
really
though,
suited
really,
to.
isn't he? I mean,
He is
I know
a 7,
he
yeah.
plays 6, but it's like
Yeah,
having 2 7
yeah,
7.
he plays 6. He plays
And
6
then
in the
the
French way.
What's his name?
Underhill.
Helmick. Underhill.
Yeah, they play with two
No, I
sevens.
wouldn't say that to his face.
But he's
Because
not
he's
a
run
number
fast
8,
enough to
and
get away from
he's not a number 8. And he's certainly not a power number 8. The way that he's been asked to play, and that strikes me as strange.
He hasn't got the back of the scrum stuff either, though. He hasn't got that nailed down at all. You can see him.
Yeah. I mean, he's
fumbly
yeah.
at the.
People forget it's a
control
skilled
at the back.
position.
It really
I've
is.
said this for years. Number 8 is a skilled position, and people forget that. But you look at England against France, and for 50 minutes they tried to play power rugby against them, and it got them nowhere. And then suddenly they realised that they had super quick outside backs, and inside backs with super quick feet, and started using them. And what's his name?
Elliot.
Not Daly, the other guy, the other winger.
No,
May.
check or
May ran
May.
right. Scored
check.
scored 2 great tries, but it hadn't occurred to them to use them earlier. If it had, it might have made a big difference.
Yeah, an unusual one. Like just thinking about the game itself, like was there any positions that do you think there was fellas that could have been pushing for that didn't get selected
In the Irish
in
team,
the Irish team? Sorry,
no, not with the injury, not with the absence of Ringrose. I think the team, and particularly after the performance against Wales, I think the team picked itself.
Yeah, and I think if there was any doubt, of say with the injury to Ringrose and calls for McCluskey to come in, and I don't know, I didn't see the match again for Ulster, but was he playing?
Yeah.
Right, so like he played in a team that was beaten by Ospreys. Do you know what I mean? So he
Oh, yeah.
clearly didn't push his case forward.
Well, I mean, in fairness, there were parts of that game where Ulster actually played very well.
Right.
But he's not an international standard centre. He's very good at what he
There's
does.
a lot of people pushing for him, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if I were going to go for that kind of player, I still wouldn't pick him. I'd pick Chris Farrell. But I'm not going to go for that kind of player because I don't think it's the right kind of player. And we saw against Wales the difference. I mean, okay, he only played 40 minutes because he got injured. But we saw the difference Henshaw made. You know,
We've got a touch of the bludgeon on the bludgeon though. They're great together, Henshaw and Aki. But like once you've got Ringrose in there, you've got your rapier. You've got your man who can cut the back lines open, link everything.
Well, it doesn't pass them.
There is an element of blade to Henshaw as well.
Scores too many tries for your liking.
I mean, he can't when he plays inside centre, he can use his size obviously, and he's a big, powerful guy. But he has quick feet and he has great hands.
He does, absolutely.
And so he can play both ways.
And with him at 13 and Eki at 12, it sits better, I think.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And I mean, the handlingest team, one of the most handlingest teams that Ireland have put out this decade, in the last 10 years anyway, was Aki and Henshaw at centre in that Connacht team under Pat Lam.
Mm-hmm.
So they can play the game, they can play skills based rugby.
Yeah, I think there's kind of you fall into the trap of saying that Henshaw is a one-trick pony
Just because he's a big guy.
Because he's a big guy, he's actually a very skillful fella, and
he's not Jamie Roberts, is that what you're saying?
Well, he's not a Danaher, let's say, where I think people are kind of equating him to just a crash ball centre.
Kevin Maggs.
Kevin Maggs, yeah, and he's not that type of player at all. And I'd say, what I mean. He's the type of fella that originally was a fullback. That they played him this time last year against England at fullback. It didn't work out, but sure, he hadn't played there before. He hadn't played there before for a considerable period of time.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since he played there.
But he still is a centre that has capability to play a fullback. So he's that skillful, rather than just give it to the big lad like Chris Farrell and run straight.
In fairness to Chris Farrell, he surprised us all with his hands.
Chris Farrell is
several occasions.
I would say in fairness to Chris. But what Henshaw has that Chris Farrell doesn't have, or McCloskey, is a kicking game. He's actually a very good kicker of the ball, and you need a second kicker. I mean, okay, he's an outside centre, so it's one further. But you can bring him into second 5/8 if you want that second kicking option.
Yeah.
And he gives you that. I think that the partnership that we have is one that's won a lot of stuff. I mean, that was for half the last Grand Slam. That was the centre partnership.
Yeah.
So
in the year up to the World Cup, I think that Aki played in nearly all of the games. It was either him
12
and
out of 13 or something.
or
Yeah.
him and Ringrose.
Yeah.
It seemed to be, one of the
He
other
was the
two
one that didn't
was
get
injured.
Didn't get
Exactly.
injured.
Yeah.
He has a lot of games for Ireland where he's got them across the line in both senses of the word. I'm very happy to have him. I think on a more serious point, you get a lot of the Luke Fitzgerald stuff about these guys are doing their people out of doing Irish lads out of it. I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think the more, even more guys like say Eddie Alokan who've been through school here.
At Blanche Boy.
The more I think he went to Dallas Hall Church then.
No, he's from Blanche. Lived in Blanche.
But the more guys you have playing GAA, playing rugby, it just kind of gives people something good, positive to identify. People who may not have a brain cell, who spout all kinds of racist nonsense. If they have people in their teams who are obviously nice, personable people who play really well, it just changes people's attitude and makes people less little racist scumbags.
I'd rather see someone like Aki getting the cap for Ireland than somebody who mum and dad are Irish but emigrated to England, and Aki has moved to Ireland 4 or 5 years ago, brought his young family over. They live here, they pay tax here, as opposed to someone whose mum and dad left 20 years ago, 30 years ago, live in England, had their child over there, and played for London Irish.
We have the best guy out of all of those.
No, for sure, but I'd rather see somebody come to Ireland and make a decision to set up here, rather than, as used to be the case, say, 20, 30 years ago, I'm, say, Simon Gagan, right, that supported England in soccer, but played rugby for Ireland, and his mum or his dad were Irish, but generally played 95% of his rugby in England, and declared for Connacht when you only had to play a couple of matches in the Interpros, but then continued to play with London Irish and Bath in England,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't really contribute, with the exception of his 20 Ireland caps and his 20 Connacht appearances.
It's an interesting
That's
point to
really
make,
all that
Jason.
he contributed to Irish rugby. Whereas
Not such a thing anymore, though.
no, I know that.
You can't play
I get that. I get that.
3
But
games
but
for Connacht.
Aki has probably played 100 matches or more for Connacht, and say 20 or 30 or 40 matches for Ireland.
Yeah,
But has contributed a lot to, the 5 years that he's been here, and is kind of seen as a rallying point within that team, and within even the supporters. He's like their hero. He's like their Rocky.
the laptop.
Well, even the laptop
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
No,
but
that shows he's part
Yeah.
of the community and the thing.
But
Look,
I'm sure
the
there's
reason, the reason why people try and differentiate between native Irish and third generation Irish, and then, if you like, new Irish, is because they're trying to other these people, right? They're trying to say, oh, Michael Bent is less Irish than me because I was born here. Bundy Aki is less Irish than Michael Bent or me because I'm Irish. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to other people. Now, maybe not in sport, but in life in general, that's what they're trying to do. And these people deserve no oxygen whatsoever. I'm very disappointed with Luke Fitzgerald because he's actually a really, really intelligent, really, really nice guy. But the stuff he says about that stuff is
It's
well, I have
open,
no doubt he means nothing bad by it.
it's open
It is
to...
stuff that is used by
Outsides.
the Gemmo Dohertys of this world, shall we say?
Let's not get too political.
No,
but
no.
Yeah, moving swiftly on.
And if you want
Sorry,
to
I
dig
started
if
that.
you want to dig into my Twitter history, you're more than welcome. God help you for reading it. Jason hasn't a clue what is happening in the news today.
Oh,
Me neither.
some Sinn Féin.
Yeah,
woman,
yeah,
I saw
yeah.
that. Yeah, I saw that. So turn our attention briefly to the other games. Italy take on Scotland. Think there could be a chance of an upset there?
There could be.
There could
There could
easily
be.
It's in Italy, isn't it?
Yeah, there could well be.
It's a,
And by upset,
it's
I
the
do
famous-
mean a home win. I do.
It's the famous wooden spoon game.
Yeah.
Whoever loses that is going home with a piece of wood.
I see Finn Russell came out and had a reveal all interview and didn't come across very apologetic, or certainly wasn't making any of the sounds to try and ingratiate himself back into the squad.
That's what happens when you play in a superstar team over in Paris in a big flashy arena, and in fairness, it is. That's the kind of team they are. They're a great team and all that, but they're a team of superstars who probably have attitude about themselves. He obviously does. So I don't know. That's not what you want. Playing for your country, you want
Guys who want to play for the
you
country.
want guys who want to play for their country, exactly. And if the more talented guy doesn't want it, then there's somebody else. who
But
can
it's amazing
take
that
it.
rugby is quite different than football. Like say Nicky Butt, or when these guys stopped playing for England fairly early, like
Only his first name
27,
was Michael, and he
27 or
so much
28, because he was earning so much money playing for Man United, and he wanted to continue playing for them for as long as possible, and didn't want the interference of playing for his national team.
Yeah,
But
it's
like,
different.
it's
different
totally
thing.
different in rugby. But like,
But the top of
there was
the game,
8,000 at a Pro 14 match last weekend, but there's 55,000 the week before at it. You know what I mean? Like there's
yeah, but
the level of
club
interest.
game is the top of the game in soccer.
Exactly.
The club game is not the top of the game.
It's a different paradigm, except maybe in France, which is where he's based, where the club game is very, very powerful, and
But
Maybe
but
changing.
but like
speak.
they've had a couple of poor, or maybe 10 years of poor performances, that somebody in the F or U or whatever FFR is making noises to say, no, actually we need to sort this out because there's too much emphasis on the club game and not enough emphasis on the national team.
oh yeah, I agree. But I mean, France, it's a slightly different thing. I'd say there's thousands of people in Perpignan and Biarritz who couldn't give a shit about the French team because it's not their country. You have that kind of thing
Well,
as
they
well.
still pay taxes to the French government, so
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day,
Yeah, but they also charge players from those areas traitor tax as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Lisa Razou has a very funny take on it. They used to play for soccer for France, but paying traitor tax to ETA. Anyway, long story. But yeah, so I mean, Finn Russell, he came out and then he got slammed the next day by Townsend et al. Lots of others kind of came out and said, well, I don't really agree with that. You know, we have a team system that they damned him with faint praise.
It's amazing though that he actually, rather than just keeping his gob shut, came out and decided
Felt the need to open it.
But then there's a few gobby fellas in that team, isn't there?
There are one or two, yes. That Donncha Ryan.
And the other game, France against Wales. See, Wales had a little go, as you mentioned earlier, about Tadhg Furlong, about his illegal scrummaging.
Yeah,
Was it Humphreys that said it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you'd think he's long enough in the tooth that he would have, again, kept his bail shut.
Yeah, but Wales like to do that. They spend an awful lot of time chirping in the media. Always have done. I thought it was a Gatlin thing. But I suppose these guys are kind of part of the Gatlin system.
But you hear...
They do chirp a lot in the
But say
media.
Robin McBride did a media conference the other day, and he was the most unassuming, you know, I'd say as hard as nails if you had to...
Lead him down a dark lane.
Exactly, or, you know, do a mauling session with him. But he, you know, he just didn't seem to be in any way offensive or...
Yeah, the
culture of the
PR culture is different. You know, I mean, if he was to do a Wales on it, you'd soon find he'd be down the back alley with Mick Dawson and Marcus Abukala flying the thumb screws. You know, it's not how Leinster do it. Wales, on the other hand, they do chirp a lot. They do spend a lot of time talking to the media about the game coming up and the game going and how the referee is wrong and how the referee will be wrong and how the other team cheats or will cheat. I mean, they've been doing it for years. It's just what they do. I mean, to a certain extent, I'd say nobody pays any attention to it because it's white noise at this stage. If you do it too often,
the game is in Wales, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, France, like ourselves, are going away to defend their possible Grand Slam, whereas Wales
This is a huge banana skin for France.
haven't got it. Well, I would say it's possibly more than that. I mean, what's France's record in Millennium Stadium?
I know, but like we're
I
supposed
think
to.
it's great.
I agree, but like, you know, 2 wins on the drought. There's talk of them being a renaissance, and
Absolutely.
turning this big corner. But
I'm not sure that they have. A, B. I think their team is just that little bit young. Likes of Ntamack, and I just think they're just not
lacking a bit of
quite at
experience.
the level yet. I think they're going to be formidable in 2023, and I think that's what the whole thing is about. They're having their own World Cup.
If Italy were able to get at their outside backs as easily as they did, you'd be damn sure Wales will.
Yeah, I don't know. I can see it going either way, but it's interesting that we're both going away to let's call it mainland Britain for the crack. What's the word I'm looking for? To prolong our.
We're both
our
going
Grand
to what will
Slam
soon
hopes.
be the Rump UK.
Anyway,
Some questions?
Yes.
Yes, we got some questions on the media of social. Murdo Thompson wants to know, do Irish players pay tax? Yes, they do. There's a tax relief scheme that professional sportsmen used to be able to take advantage of, but it's come to an end as some guys grandfathered in. And he says, Cooney will be toast if we lose, but Finn has come out of this as being a real dick. Still love to watch him play. Could be European player of the year. Well, that's true. I mean, he's a wonderful player to watch play when he's on.
mm-hmm.
When he's off, you may as well be watching Arwell Thomas on a bad day. Brian Hughes makes a good point, and it actually leads into a news story from today. He says, Brian Byrne, Cronin, Kelleher, Tracy, Sheehan, all into 2 spots, and maybe a backup. Discuss. Well, the news today is that Brian Byrne's going to Bristol on loan for the remainder of the season.
Wow.
I don't know.
That's a big one.
I don't know how Ed Byrne will react to that. Will he cry himself to sleep at night without his twin? I don't know. Don't twins have that kind of weird?
Do they?
Yeah.
No, basically what will happen is Ed Byrne will be able to see how things are going.
Yes, there is that as well.
Over
Yes,
in Bristol
yes,
and
yes.
report back to us. And,
Yeah.
and,
So he might be hoovering up some of Ian Madigan's 700 grand.
Yeah, well,
But I don't think Bristol are going to continue paying that. If he's
Bristol
not.
are buying. Well, I don't think they're going to re-sign Madigan. If they do, they'll do it at a lower
It was
rate.
funny. Like I used
Maybe
to,
that's what they're at. Maybe they're trying to bring his value down and maybe re-sign him.
maybe, but I used to love.
We'll give you a game if you stay.
I used to love watching him when he
that's
played, but I remember when he was looking, when he kind of his move didn't work out, and he was saying, "Well, there's only one team I couldn't ever see myself playing
And that's
against
Munster.
Leinster."
Yeah.
And then I saw an interview with him, and he says, "Oh, I'd be very open to any offers that came from Ireland."
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, fair play to the guy. I mean, he is a great professional. He's a fabulous kicker. He's a lot going for him.
Until he sends the pound as well. But I know a
He's a
few
very nice
people
chap
have
from what I've...
not incidents, but dealings with him, and he's
I always
And he sounds
found him very nice as well. And
So-
the games I had with him when I was with the Sports Club. And the other thing is about him, for a player of his type, we'll say for want of a better phrase, the Carlos Spencer, Shane Geraghty style player. Those guys were great when it was all going well, and when it was all going badly, they fell apart. The thing about Ian Madigan,
He
is
didn't.
he didn't. His goal kicking, for example, always remains rock solid. So he obviously has a strong mentality. Now, I don't think that he happens to be the best out half for Leinster. Just the style we play and the style he plays. That's just the way it is. But he's a fantastic rugby player, and I think it's shocking that he didn't get a contract in Ireland last time around.
Yeah.
but maybe his asking price was a bit too much.
They were
perhaps.
back in
Possibly,
Bristol. Were
possibly.
back in Arctics full of money up to his house and
Possibly.
offloading
I'm sure.
bin lorries.
I'm sure
full.
Bordeaux, I'm sure he was on big books in Bordeaux as well.
Yeah, well, he thought the better of that, and then
Yeah,
They
well,
stuck
But
him
it
Yeah.
was the culture.
Yeah.
There wasn't the money that he was
Oh,
giving
I
out.
know,
It was the
but
culture.
they
that-
stuck him on
And you also-
500 grand.
You also have to
a
remember
year.
that, I mean,
Sterling.
he was, well, that's how much they had to pay him that much money because he wouldn't be playing for Ireland. That's kind of the
Quid pro quo.
The quid pro quo. You're not going to play for Ireland, so you may as well get a lot of money. I'd say if that time, and he was being shopped around the provinces. There's no doubt about it. He was doing every single media show that was going at the time. I mean, we're about the only thing he wasn't on.
I think that.
But he was obviously been shopped around Ireland, and it was very striking how there were no takers, not even Ulster, who were coming into out half trouble, predictable out half trouble
would you rather
at
have?
the time.
Would you rather have him or Billy Burns?
I don't-
At
I-
out half.
oh, him.
There
Yeah,
you go.
certainly him.
Billy
Yeah.
Burns is in the Irish training
Yeah.
squad.
Billy Burns is a very good player, and he's done very well, and he's made the most of his opportunity. But I'd still have Ian Madigan in a heartbeat.
If
Ian
would
Madigan's
you
just
have-
turning 30 now, though, isn't he?
Would you
He's
have?
just turning.
I
30.
know, but there
Would you
is this
have
kind
Ian
of
Madigan?
magical line, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you have Ian Madigan or would you have Jack Carty?
I'd have Ian Madigan actually.
I would again have Ian Madigan. So there's two players that he's going to get ahead of.
Yeah.
Joey Carberry's perma injured.
JJ Hanrahan,
I'd have Ian Madigan ahead of him too.
Blendell.
Will he ever play
Perma
again?
injured. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Hopefully he will. But
Hopefully he will.
And
but
the other thing to remember about Ian Madigan is he's
I'm just
he's
marking
bloody hard.
off all the guys who.
if you think to say there's 10, let me just throw the figure out there. 10 front line out halves
back
in
to the days
Ireland.
when it was just Raj.
You're probably talking 7 of the 10 that you'd have Ian Madigan ahead of.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
At least.
Actually, I'd go 8 of the 10. The only guys I'd really, well, hold on, who's the 7th?
Let's say Sexton, right?
Sexton, yeah. Ross Byrne,
Ross Byrne,
Carberry.
Carberry.
Carberry, yeah. I'd put him on a par with Carberry indeed because he's very similar style of player.
Similar enough, yeah.
I'd certainly have him back in the Irish system. God Almighty, yeah, a player like that. I'd
Love that.
absolutely
like,
quality.
Yeah.
That's why I was so
Scrum
surprised.
half reserve.
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, you look at him; he's tough as nails as well because
He is,
he's
yeah.
played a lot of rugby in
He gets
inside
stuck
centre.
in. Yeah.
He's very, very hard. He's a good footballer. He's played a lot of inside. I actually thought that insides. I thought he'd be in the Irish system. He'd take the place of Paddy Wallace
Yeah.
as that guy, you know. But he can play there. He can play at 12, at 15 as well. Okay, he's not a brilliant fullback, but he's certainly more than adequate for Pro 14 rugby, along with his other attributes. That's why I was so surprised, especially with the trouble that was coming down the line at Ulster that everybody knew about. I mean, Ireland had already not taken Paddy Jackson to America.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
So there was something happening, but there was no takers. And then, funny enough, he's represented by Ryan Constable, or he was at the time represented by Ryan Constable,
You think that would have got him into Ulster?
which you would have thought. But there was a rigid no. I mean, what's their names? Connacht were quite snitty about it, if you remember. Connacht were quite rude about not wanting them. From their former CEO, who soon bit the dust.
We shall see.
But
Watch this space. He could be in negotiations currently. With
I'd hope so. I'd love to see him back in
one or
Ireland.
more
I
of the
think
provinces.
I think he'd be even at the age of 30, as cruel eld hath palsied his limbs. I still think that at 30 he'd be a worthwhile member of the Irish setup.
I remember when I was 30. No, actually, I don't.
No, neither do I.
Black and white days.
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple of very interesting podcasts. One was on News Talk. It was an hour's interview with.
We never actually asked the question about the hookers.
Sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Yeah,
All right.
we never actually answered it.
Talk about tangents.
Like he's talking about Brian Byrne, Crone, and Kelleher, Tracy, Sheehan into 2 spots and maybe a backup. Yeah, that's actually.
It's actually a bit mental the way it's all
Yeah.
done.
Don't worry, they won't all be here next year.
Well,
Yeah, but like
This is
there's
it.
going to be
Brian
more than
Byrne-
two spots. Like you're talking about an Heineken Cup final.
mhm.
Like, well, you can know the first two. Like you've got the guy who's sub on the Irish team and the fella that used to be sub on the Irish team.
yeah,
And
Well, there's
then-
two fellas who used to be so good on the
Okay,
Irish
but
team.
like Cronin's been sub 90 times on the
Yeah.
Irish team.
Yeah.
Tracy's done it twice or 3 times, whatever. But like,
Cronin was the sub on the bench for Ireland when we were in Twickenham in 2010.
was he?
So that's how long. That's 10 years. Yeah, the squeezed middle, Tracy and Byrne, you'd call the squeezed middle.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Like Kelleher and Shane hasn't even made his Leinster debut yet.
No.
And there was a chap, Owen Clark, who actually went to Munster, and like a lot of players who go to Munster, haven't seen anything of him. But he kind of went to Munster because of the emergence of guys like Kelleher, mainly Kelleher. And I think that Dan Sheehan came into the space that he might have occupied had he stayed in Leinster.
Yeah.
And you've also got Dan Sheehan has a little brother who's only about 18 months younger than him. Who's
Do you know what I'd love to? I'd
Another monster.
love to wait for one of these guys to actually play a senior game before I went mad on the hype.
absolutely, but
You know,
they do
sometimes-
look like really, really talented.
Yeah,
Keller already has, is in the Irish squad, so let's say he's there. But Sheehan is coming up on the rails for sure. He, like you say, you want to see him make his debut for Leinster at least before you go too mad.
Yeah.
You go offloading other players, but
Because I mean, there's
it could in a year's time it could be a huge headache.
there's a couple of things. I mean, there's going to be natural wastage there with Cronin and Tracy anyway. Or certainly with Cronin anyway.
Cronin is 33 or so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Brian Byrne is going to Bristol on loan, certainly in the short term. So you've got Kelleher, Tracy, Cronin here, Sheehan, who has yet to make his debut for Leinster.
It won't be long.
Let's not forget.
It won't be long.
So, I mean, it's not a pressing issue as of yet. It may well become one, but it's not as of yet. And another question there from Stephen Harris: should Jones play Farrell at 10 or 12? Yes.
I play Farrell at 10 all day and twice on
Yeah,
Sundays.
so would I. Yeah.
George Ford is actually a great player, but I'm not sure he suits England's style of play.
No.
And that 10-12 thing, that second 5-8 thing, I'm not sure it's suiting him.
No, I don't think it's working. Getting the best out of either player.
I bring in Henry Slade, or the man is injured, isn't he, Joseph? I bring in somebody else and put Farrell at 10, and I'd have what's his name at 22, George Ford.
Yeah, no,
he's the kind of guy you bring on at 10.
Yeah. No,
When-
I
either when you're trying to defend the lead or when you're trying to, loosen up the game.
I don't think I think Farrell is a far better out half than George Ford, and I think he's a far worse inside centre than Ford is out half. So I'd use him
I
at out
think
half.
I know what you mean.
I'd use him at that. I mean, if you think about it at the moment, you've got guys like him. You got Farrell, Bigger, Sexton. There's a lot of great out halves around at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually quite lucky, and obviously the lads down in Southern Hemisphere as well. So
Just a few of them.
That's what I mean. I mean, there's a lot of really great out halves. So using one of them at 10, I like that 10-12 apps, but you have to have the right players for it. And I don't think that they have.
Trying to shoehorn two good players into the team.
It's like trying to play Ward and Campbell that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just going back to, I was just about to say, there was a
Sorry.
very, very interesting podcast on News Talk
Oh yeah.
last Friday. It was an hour-long
Haven't heard it
interview
yet.
with Lancaster. One of the questions that came up was, and it was Jerry Gilroy doing it, and he'd been an advocate of trying to have this, almost like American football, that you have
The draft.
the draft system or some
Combine.
or some sort of variant of it.
Voting
But-
for Combine.
Yes.
But Lancaster was very adamant in saying, from his 3 years here, that the thing that makes Leinster special, and all the provinces special, is that identity.
Mm.
And that if you have too many people moving between the provinces, that you're diluting it. Now, you know what I mean? There's
Ronan Keller said the same a couple of weeks ago.
There's just two sides to the arguments, of course. But like when you hear one of the coaches coming out and saying, and now maybe he might change his attitude if he was back in England, and you know,
He wanted to see the Leinster.
I don't know, but I mean,
Championship.
if he didn't have any skin in the game, but I think he was been genuine about it. You know, that's what he thinks makes this place so special, and unlike a lot of the English clubs, that there's no identity to the area. That a fella comes in and he could be from Newcastle but he's playing in Bristol, or he comes from Bath and he's playing up in, you know, Sale, but there's no kind of identity to the area.
That's a criticism I'd have of he who shall not be named. You look at Australia and you look how crowds have fallen off in Australia, and interesting. Now there's a lot of other problems. I'm not saying it's all down to this or whatever, but shifting players
He
around.
broke it before he left.
I'm not like Australia. Their states are actual things. They're actual. I mean, Australia is, to all intents and purposes, a series of countries with an overarching federal
It's
government.
like the United States
It's
of
like the
America.
United States of America.
Except there's less of them.
So their states are actual real things, not nebulous historical constructs like we have in Ireland. And yet he managed to diminish, or sorry, not he, I'm not going to blame him. The identity of those states was diminished by the way players were moved around, seemingly willy-nilly, in Australian rugby, with Western Force, the Melbourne Rebels, and then switching guys between the Reds and the Waratahs and the Brumbies. If you diminish one of your brand identifiers so much, it can damage your brand. And I think it did in Australia, and I think, look, we're not anywhere near that yet in Ireland, but I think it's something you have to be wary of.
And
I'd have to take
particularly
exception,
when
Dave, with
they have
the-
sorry John, particularly when they have the state of origin in rugby league, and it was probably one of the major driving forces to make rugby league such a huge sport there, that they had these 3-game series, and you know, they had legends of the game, and Queensland was traditionally the much weaker state within rugby league, and yet, and there was only a couple of teams, and back in the 90s there was only a couple of teams in what was known as the NSW rugby league. There was the Brisbane Broncos, and there was one other team, can't remember which one.
Cowboys, was it?
Cowboys, yeah. From Queensland, yet they were still able to pretty much hold their own, you know, in the state of origin, and that sort of drove and brought the increased the interest level within that sport. Whereas, as you say, Dave, they've diminished the interest in rugby union. Like, you know, when you think back to the 90s again, rugby union was, I wouldn't say it was a huge sport, but it was so much bigger than it is now in Australia. Like, they were getting to World Cup finals, they were winning World Cup finals, they were producing fantastic players, and they were holding them off from going to rugby league, a much bigger and lucrative professional sport. And now, like, they're struggling. Like, when you look at a Super 14 match on the telly, it's
dreadful.
It's dreadful. What I mean is, there's zero atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's hard to get up for it when they're playing in stadiums that hold 20 or 50,000 people, and there's 5,000
The old
in it.
Murrayfield conundrum.
Yeah.
Well, what I have to take exception with you about, Dave, is calling Irish regions or Irish provinces some weird historical construct.
Nebulous story.
Very good historical construct, when they've been around for 1,000 years, and Australia was only invaded by white people about 250 years ago.
So what I mean is, there is no difference.
Before I start thumping the table,
there's no difference been from Leinster or from Munster in terms of your relationship to, you know, your everyday life, right? Apart from the rugby team you support, really. I mean, it doesn't even make a difference in Gaelic football anymore. The Railway Cup, which was once the crown jewel of Gaelic football.
Irish by birth, Munster for life.
Yeah.
By
But
the grace of God.
even a very conservative sport like Gaelic games, the Railway Cup, which was the provincial competition, which was originally a very strong competition, has completely fallen by the wayside, like completely.
Well, in fairness, the branches are and have always been organised on
And
a
same with
provincial
Gaelic football.
basis.
What I'm saying is, in Australia, a province is an actual
I know it's an actual
legal
state.
identity. It's a state. It's a country in all but name.
Different tax in different states.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's like America. They have a common defence policy and a common foreign
Federal
policy,
government.
and that's pretty much it.
Federal government in Canberra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Ireland going over and getting beaten not by ACT, but getting beaten by ACT country, and getting beaten not by New South Wales, but getting beaten by New South Wales country, because we weren't good enough to play New South Wales.
I'm actually rereading Brendan Fanning's fantastic book From
There to Here.
There to Here,
Yeah.
about the leap from amateurism to professionalism, and one of the chapters is on a tour down to Australia, where they were beaten, as you mentioned, you know, the weaker teams were beating Ireland out the gate, and we were just
Yeah, was a good
balling. You know?
It finished up around 99, that book, didn't it?
I think
Did it go into the...
yeah.
Would you fancy any Australian Super Rugby team against any of the provinces at full strength? Both teams at full strength.
I haven't seen much of them lately, but
I wouldn't.
most likely not.
I wouldn't.
They seem to be getting destroyed on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Yeah,
And see,
I stopped watching Super Rugby.
what's his name? Jordan Pataya is out of the summer tour, Ireland summer tour to Australia. Because he was a good player for them during the World Cup, actually.
Was, and he's only 6 years old.
Yeah.
Any more questions, Dave?
Born this millennium. There's no Leinster players that have made their debut who were born this millennium yet.
I know. Yeah.
He's played in the World Cup,
I'm gonna have to have.
and he's born this
I'm gonna have to have a
millennium.
word with Jamie Heaslip. He reckoned it would happen last year or the year before.
Oh, well.
No, those are all our questions,
Okay.
Jason.
Well-
and thank you for the questions. We really enjoyed them.
And briefly, just turn our attention to Leinster's game next weekend.
Oh yeah, in the Knoll,
In the Knoll, yeah.
the
So,
Knoll.
obviously, I would similar enough kind of team. Obviously, taking out the internationals, but it's going to be kind of a selection between seconds and thirds.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Be interesting to see, can we keep that train rolling? You know, what are we at now?
17.
17 games on the bench.
I'd say there'll be a lot of guys who started that game will still be available for selection. I mean, Deegan will probably be available for selection, will he? Unless he goes as
He might be
24th man.
24th, yeah.
No, I don't think any of the Irish squad have been released.
They
at
haven't
all.
actually, no, because there was Connacht were looking for Delan to be released. Apparently they made a formal request, but he hasn't been.
Well, I think Ireland are taking. They even got Bono in to talk to them. I think they're taking it seriously this week. So, if you've even got a chance of making 0.0001% of a difference to the Irish team, you're not gonna. You're going nowhere this
that's the thing.
weekend.
Professional sport at that
You know?
level is so
The
tough.
Ospreys,
Mhm.
what? Forget about it,
If something does give you, I mean, even Bono gives you that 0.01% of a boost, then take it. You know, they've had
I
Christy Moore.
reckon he did.
Christy Moore's played for the Irish squad 11 times.
Mhm.
Yeah, he enjoys it very much. He's a big rugby fan.
Interesting. Well, obviously,
Snow
Bono
Patrol
was
famously
fair play to
didn't
him.
play for them.
Snow Patrol famously wanted to play for them,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
weren't down. Who was it?
Jamie Heaslip.
Jamie Heaslip, yeah. He didn't know who they were.
No, he did. He had tickets for them. And he said, there's no point in going to see them again.
Oh, that's it, yeah, yeah. He got slaughtered for that.
Mm.
But yeah, so I mean, it's nice. It's a bit of a retro step, you know, going back to the Knoll.
Maybe that's what the provinces
Apparently, we played
need
there.
to do in Wales, is to go back in and try and reintegrate themselves back into the...
It's too far gone now, Jason. Like,
Okay, maybe so, but like you
How
can't...
about the genie back in the bottle?
So what are you going to do? You're just going to let it fester, and
No.
it has to be fixed, or else
If it were
pro
me,
rugby dies.
I mean, the reason it's been done is because of fixture class.
Yeah, I know
okay?
that, yeah.
But if it were me, I'd have gone whole hog at this, right? If I were in the marketing department of
Need Swansea
Ospreys.
Ospreys.
I'd have gone whole hog. I'd have a special commemorative black kit made, the Ospreys badge on one side with the cross pate on the other, and I'd give it the full retro kind of thing that this is, you know, this is your neat side.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not, but it is. It's not, but it is against Leinster, and I'd give it the full gun as they say. But they seem to be just we're playing it in the Knoll.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have made a big deal about it, and I'd have done it with other teams as well. That you could.
But they should be moving all of the clubs around and play. Instead of... Like, it's different if they're selling out the Liberty Stadium, but they
Yeah.
don't. So they're moving it to an 8,000 capacity stadium. But like that's
10
probably...
miles away.
That's probably 3,000 more than they need.
Possibly.
Yeah, the other thing is though, and this is the problem, that what you're saying would work 100% in an Irish context, right, or in an English context even, but in a Welsh context where the clubs hate the regions, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the entire ground was booby trapped come Saturday.
Well,
Because
they are the
don't
one
want
true
to-
region. I know Neath and Swansea don't particularly love each other, but
I think that's why
they are the most successful region in terms of how they.
I think that's why they were the one true reason, because they were built on something genuine, hatred.
Well, like Clonetly or Scarlets are basically Clonetly.
Yeah.
There's no real merger going on there. Cardiff are basically
There's an
Cardiff.
awful lot of rivalry between, particularly in Munster, between clubs, between cities. Yet they managed to pull it together, and they said we have a professional.
Still a bit
entity.
of a Limerick Cork thing going on there.
There is, but it's put aside. like they've moved the major stadium has been done in Limerick. They've moved the dual training facilities to have one centre of excellence.
Yeah.
You know, the money in Munster rugby is really in Cork.
You don't think there's disenfranchised Cork Munster rugby fans?
I'm sure there is, but like they have managed to put their differences aside and develop a club that divide isn't really spoken about.
But they had such a good run in the early days.
Maybe that's what got them over the hump.
I think that's what did it.
And the Swansea lads probably did as well, and maybe that's why they're the most successful regional side.
Like if you think back to 06, for us, from our point of view, like there was huge resentment from Leinster branch that what the clubs did with the tickets for that Munster match.
Yeah.
You know,
rightly so.
Oh, rightly so. But you know, the clubs that were seeing their say cash cow, but their income being decimated by the Leinster matches. See, whether it was 8,000 or 5,000 people turning up to Donnybrook to watch a Leinster team, meant that the 200 that would go to one club and 200 to another club and 200, they're only going to spend a certain amount of time every weekend going to watch rugby. They weren't going to go watch a match in Donnybrook on a Friday night and rock on down to watch Wesley against De La Salle Palmerston on a Saturday. Like, they just weren't. So, and therefore the money that people were going to spend in the clubhouse and the bars and so on, like, that was gone. So the clubs needed to survive. So I can kind of, in some respects, concede that they saw an opportunity to make a killing, but there was a resentment there between the clubs and the province, and then the province then kind of yielded flexed their muscles for 3 years later.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and rightly so again.
But the constituents of the branch come from the clubs, so like all the members of the committees are.
That's true, but there's a subtle difference between the Leinster professional team and the Leinster branch that runs the domestic game. They're not
synonymous.
Not quite synonymous. They're theoretically.
But like John, that probably happened. I couldn't tell you the date, but it probably happened 10 or 12 years ago. But Leinster, the professional entity, existed for 12, 15 years before.
I actually think that it happened because the Munster clubs were a lot cuter than the Leinster clubs. Munster clubs realised that Europe was where it was at.
But the whole thing happened immediately. Like, 2000.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Munster went from playing in front of 500 people in round one to beating say Saracens in round 4 or 5, whatever it was, to then all of a sudden there was 5,000 people going over to the semi-final.
I think Munster clubs realised that the European competition was where it was at a lot earlier than Leinster clubs did. That's why, we still have that. Up until quite recently, there's still been a lot that the Munster branch would have more input into Munster rugby than the Leinster branch would have into Leinster rugby, if you know what I mean. To the extent that, there was 2 sets of season tickets available. Things like that. All that kind of stuff. Because Munster clubs realised early on that Europe was the future. You had...
They got a taste of it in 2000.
No
one went to travel with it. Like, the first time I went away with Leinster was in 2003 against Sale. And there was probably no more than 50 people at that European Cup match, right? Bearing in mind that Munster had been to 2 finals, and I had been at the final in the Millennium Stadium in 2002, where there was probably 60,000 of them in the 80,000, probably 50,000 in the 75,000 seater stadium. Yet there was 50 people going to watch a Leinster Heineken Cup match abroad. Do you know what I mean? So there was no rivalry, because there was a few thousand would go and watch a Leinster home match, but you don't go to the away matches because it wasn't a thing.
But for whatever reason, Leinster rugby didn't think European rugby was going to be a thing, or Leinster branch clubs didn't think. So the Leinster rugby was able to go off and do its own little thing in the corner without anyone really noticing. By the time the Leinster clubs in 2006 realised Leinster rugby had become a thing that was able to, 3 years later, put the smack down on them in terms of what Mick Dawson said about international tickets and stuff like that. That's like threatening a man's child. Threatening a club's international tickets is the worst thing you can. But Leinster rugby felt confident enough to do that. The Welsh relationship is very, very different. Because the club game over there was so strong, or whether because the ties to the club game over there were so strong, maybe the game itself was strong, but the ties to it were so strong, that regionalisation, although it was the only solution that a country that size, with that population, with rugby in that position in terms of popularity, regionalisation was the only choice it had. It was still going to be fought against, and it still is being fought against. Like, when you talk about Cardiff, you mentioned Cardiff there. I mean, Pontypridd, one of the great club, are a club easily as prestigious as Cardiff in the great scheme of rugby history. Yet they're part of Cardiff's region, but they have nothing to do with it.
I actually saw them play against Leinster in a Heineken Cup match in probably, I don't know, I think the year maybe 96, 97.
But that's the thing.
Evervale are part of, I think they're part of the Dragons region,
yeah.
and Evervale are a very famous rugby club. But there's no, they don't. The whole relationship.
I know, but
broken,
like but you do have to move on. Like the club that I used to play for Wanderers used to play Coventry, which was, and it was there could have, you know, this is, as I say, a biannual fixture that would be, you know, both those clubs probably were providing. I'm taking a number out of my head now. Probably providing 4 out of the 30 players that were playing for Ireland the next day, and yet, you know, Wanderers is you know, languishing in Division 2B or whatever they are, and Coventry are a couple of leagues below the Premiership.
Yeah, and I agree. You do have to let it go, but the problem is in Wales they never have.
Sure.
That's the point. I mean, I'm not saying that they're right. What I'm saying is
It's
this is how
also
it
their
is.
strength was their weakness, because their clubs were so strong, they were actually strong enough to go into the Heineken Cup, and they did.
Yeah.
They played in our league for 2 seasons as well
Yeah,
as the 9 clubs of their Premiership. They were actually, what killed them was their own strength. If they had been either a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker, if they were weaker, regionalism might have happened earlier and it might have been bought into more. If they were stronger, maybe they still would have survived, you know, pretty much intact. Which really
they were the wrong amount of strong enough.
they were the wrong way to strong enough. Yeah, that's what it is. Ours were at this, like, even though our clubs were pretty strong in the AIL in the early 90s before professionalism, they still weren't at the level of the Welsh regions, and whoever had the brilliant idea, I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, of putting the provinces in, which was at that stage just an invitational 2 or 3 games a year, when all the guys were pulled from their clubs to play provincial rugby, became an actual professional team. I mean, that was an inspired choice, but only with hindsight, you know, it could have been a disaster.
Tom Kiernan probably.
It was, I can't remember now who it was.
Sid Miller, maybe one of those.
I think Sid Miller, yeah. It won't come to my brain. Anyway.
If it had been, I mean, there was a club down in Limerick, Gary Owen wanted to go.
Yeah, that's right.
So like a guy called Frank Hogan was kind of a big backer, and he was like, he saw Gary Owen as being an equivalent of Bath.
Yeah.
You know?
Which under the old structures it was, but in the new world of professional rugby, we see there just isn't the numbers there to support. Like we see it in soccer. I mean, there's 4 professional teams, 3 professional teams in Dublin City. Right? There aren't numbers, not at the top level. There's the numbers to support them at the level they're at, and maybe actually a bit higher, because I think we know that it's badly run. But the numbers there, like, to support 3 professional clubs at an English Championship or Premiership level, just isn't there in soccer. And it'd be the same in rugby. I mean, there's 4 or 5 senior clubs, 6 senior clubs in Dublin alone. I mean, if they were to all go pro and all expect to be the same kind of pro as Leinster are pro, there just isn't the money or the population there. Yeah. We have a limited population. True. I mean, London can barely support 2 rugby clubs, and that's a mega city.
Well, they have 4, don't they?
Well, they will have. They'll have 3. Well, one's gone. I mean, there was Wasps, Saracens, Irish, Twins, and then Wasps are gone, Saracens are gone out of London. London Irish are moving back into London.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a city of what, 8 to 12 million people.
Yeah.
Metropolitan area of 12 million people, 20 million people, 12 million people.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
There's 180 million people.
It depends on how you define the metropolitan area of London. But
it extends out past Berlin, as far as I know.
Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks for being
there. You take my breath away, John.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook or Twitter, please give us a thumbs up, like, answer. What's the word? subscribe.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Two lots of that.